And now we are live. So we should be popping up here just any minute on Substack. But John, good morning. It is good to
Good
see you.
morning. Yeah, good to see you too.
It's been a couple weeks.
Couple weeks.
You were busy out making music
I was, yeah.
and doing the thing you do best. And so,
Yeah, that's
you know, this show is all about having discussions, interesting discussions. And, you have today brought some. I think this is going to be a very valuable discussion just from what we had ahead of just the little words we exchanged beforehand, because competence, leadership, and there is really, I don't think, a better example of a world leader. I could argue if there's anyone up there, maybe von der Leyen, and what she's managed to do with the EU is impressive, that she's been able to get them to do things. Not
yeah,
necessarily that she herself is like, I don't know her moral background as much as I'm familiar with Carney,
right.
but the ability to get the EU to do anything in and of itself is impressive as a world leader. But no one has impressed me more than Mark Carney. So I'm looking forward to this discussion today, especially because your background being Canadian and for a lot of our American, or anywhere who's watching from wherever to get that kind of context. So,
Right.
John.
So the preamble is that here in Canada last week, we had by-elections in 3 ridings. Now, the federal government has been in a minority government position. Just to explain to Americans who may not understand our system, our government can fail at any point. It can be defeated at any point by a simple vote in the House of Commons. All they have to do is there have to be enough people who say we don't have confidence in this government anymore. And if more than 50% say that's the case and vote on it, then the government falls and we have an election. It's that simple. Okay. And that creates a robustness and an absolute responsibility of government to pay attention to what the
Yeah.
population is asking.
Mm-hmm.
So recently, there were 3 by-elections, and Mark Carney's Liberal Party won all of them.
Wow.
This now put his party in the majority government position.
That's huge. In a
Okay.
parliamentary system, that's huge.
So what that means is that now, if as long as he doesn't screw up and his own people go against him, he can govern until 2029 without opposition. The only way he can be defeated is if members of his own party are dissatisfied with him and vote against him. It can still happen, but it's much less likely with a majority government. So I thought it's a really important time, since Mark Carney's way of doing things has been in the news for weeks and months now, and we really understand what he's able to achieve. And some people might be wondering, they might get a glimpse of what the backstory is. Why is this guy so good at this?
Mm-hmm.
And why does he seem so genuine and convincing in his discourse, everything he says? And it's based on this book that I've been dipping into. It's a very huge, thick book.
One might call it a tome.
Yeah, this is a tome. It was copyright 2021. So this is
Okay.
right at the beginning of COVID. And there's a lot of things in here that take what happened during COVID as examples of why change is happening. The book's called Values by Mark Carney. It's and you'll notice the S is in a bracket because one of his main points is that value as a concept determines our values collectively as people.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
so he's talking about, and the subtitle is Building a Better World for All. Okay, so obviously he's not, if that's in the title of his book, he's not going to talk about making the 1% more wealthy, is he?
No. No.
So he's definitely some, a thinker who's been the governor of the Bank of England and the Bank of Canada, but he's not some economist egghead who just thinks about numbers and can only talk about numbers. This book is very philosophical. So if I can, usually Shane and I have a pretty rousing discussion, and we wander around and bat back and forth our ideas and whatnot. But I want to read some of these passages,
Yeah.
kind of straight through,
Yeah.
somewhat uninterrupted. Obviously, we're going to have something to say about at some point. A paragraph's going to stick out. Well, we'll have to give examples or talk about it. But let's get to these basic ideas. And there's several sections I want to go. The first section I want to go on is called The Attributes of Value-Based Leadership. And then the next section I want to dip into is called Reclaiming the Values to Create Value for All. There we go. He does this value thing quite a bit.
I think before you get started, I think like you pointing that out is important, because it's like, I love, there's a quote, and I'm going to paraphrase it because I'm probably wrong, but like, words are the lens through which we view reality.
Right.
Right. So when you use language intentionally, and you can tell he's using language intentionally, it's a mark of intelligence.
Right.
It's a mark of someone knowing that they're trying to communicate a message, but if they really want people to get that message across, they know that they need to deliver it through that lens. So I think that's something I noticed before you kind of kick off here.
Right.
Cool.
So the language is not purposefully like intellectual sounding. It's a read that anybody can read, but he's very good. I mean, his English is amazing. So I won't read fast. I'll read so that we can understand. So this first section is probably the most important one, because it kind of defines the whole paradigm of what he's talking about. It's actually at the end of the book. The first 300 some odd pages are really about economy, and there's a lot of really difficult reading. And in fact, I had to skip most of it because I wanted to go to this section about government and leadership. The attributes of value-based leadership, I'm going to read and quote now.
Okay.
Finding and developing the right people, setting priorities and catalyzing action are things that all leaders must do. But what ultimately most determines a leader's effectiveness is who they are. We're talking about Mark Carney today, so we're going to talk about who this guy is. In my experience, leadership qualities are not inherent. They can be developed. In other words, a leader isn't a born leader necessarily. The attributes are not finite goods that are exhausted by use, but are like muscles that grow with regular exercise. They are virtues that can be nurtured. And just to quickly say that there are political leaders who do not grow, and they have assumptions that they've always had. And we know who the leader of the USA is. And if you go back into his history, you'll see that he hasn't changed in decades. There are 5 essential and universal attributes of leadership: purpose, perspective, clarity, competence, humility. I'll read that again. Purpose, leader has to have purpose. Perspective, that means talking with others. Clarity, being, thoughtful and figuring things out. Competence, self-explanatory. Humility. Footnote: Does Donald Trump have any of those attributes, do you think?
Maybe purpose, to steal every dollar from the American people, and but other than that, I would say that he entirely lacks everything else.
Perspective, he never seeks it from others. Clarity, he's never clear about what the hell he's doing. He's like Taco Tuesday thing, right? Competence, clearly incompetent. He can't do things right. Humility, there's the big one. Now, I'm going to that word humility becomes a really important end. That's the last chapter of this book, and he talks about humility, and that's a really important one. Purpose. Let's get to purpose. Yeah, okay, so I'll try to skip around here. Purpose is what an organization stands for. Now, he's talking about organizations that could be businesses or government or any nonprofit organization, anybody who's leading any kind of organization, or maybe even your family, right? So what purpose is what an organization stands for, why it does what it does, and what it should be trusted to deliver. trust is a word that comes up a lot in this book. Purpose is always broader than a simple bottom line. An organization's purpose can be for the client, such as Shopify is making commerce better for everyone. For a higher purpose, such as Google's to organize the world's information, well, they did that pretty well. Or for the greater good, such as the World Bank's mission to end extreme poverty. Those are all a bit, negotiable in terms of thinking about those three entities. Anyway,
I have a point if you're okay
yeah,
with like I just
go for it.
So you mentioned that there's purpose and the bottom line are like not the same thing, and I actually wrote that down.
Yeah, that's right.
Um,
Yeah, purpose isn't always just the bottom line of an organization. It's
right.
social capital, and he talks about this throughout the book. He talks about businesses and governments not being able to function if they don't have what's called social capital. In other words, that we, the people, buy into what they are doing. We agree with it. And he talks about that social capital a lot in the book.
Yeah, and there's a great example, I think, of real time here in America that I can give you. The news isn't covering it, but warehouses all over the country are catching on fire. Amazon fulfillment centers, like big storage warehouses, big box stores, right? All the stores or all the facilities where people work, crap hours for, they get set, in a lot of these places in the South of the United States, I mean, you're still seeing minimum wages under $10.
Yeah.
And my partner, she said to me the other day, it's like, well, they work an hour for a bag of Doritos. Like, it's like, yeah, like there's going to be a point where if you're working 3 jobs, and you still can't eat, you're going to start burning stuff. Like that's what happens. Like, there was a quote I saw the other day. I was watching a YouTube video and he said, paying a living wage is cheaper than a revolution.
Yeah.
And like that's what it's all about, right? Like that's what Carney is saying is if you offer value, if you facilitate trust that the government is going to take care of you, protect you, then you're going to have systems that are stable.
Exactly right.
And self-sufficient.
Yeah,
So.
he's talking about that quite often. That when social capital evaporates, when the population no longer supports the society, the government, the businesses, then the businesses will fail. They can't sustain it. And in fact, the next paragraph I was going to read articulates almost exactly what you said.
Okay.
He's saying, like diversity, purpose is not nice to have. Evidence shows that purposeful companies have higher employment engagement, greater customer satisfaction, tighter supply linkages, and better environmental stewardship. In other words, it's good business to pay your workers, to have environmental protections. All of these things that increase social capital are good to have. The payoffs to purposeful business are superior share price performance, better operational performance. In other words, the workers aren't pissed off, so they work better. Lower costs of capital, smaller regulatory fines. They're not, breaking the rules all the time, so they don't have fines. And greater resilience in the face of shocks. All of that's true. If you have employees who are happy to work at your company, then if you end up with some external force that's putting pressure on your business, you're not going to pass that pressure down to your employees and reduce their work hours or whatever, and cause conflict. You're going to be resilient. So good. So good. Yeah. Now let's go on to perspective, I think was the next one. Consistent with purposeful ambition, leaders must assess the landscape to determine how their organization can plan the future. Note that the distinction from planning for the future, it's again language. Planning for the future or planning the future.
Intent.
Okay, so when you plan the future, that means you're actively forming your organization to work in the future. When you plan for the future, it's like a disaster approach, like we got to protect ourselves from the unknown. But if you're planning the future, that means you're taking control of your company's future. Ambitious leadership means helping to shape the future rather than just reacting to it, which is essentially what I just said.
Yeah.
So organizations need both resilience against storms and to make the weather. It's a little metaphor. So leaders can't limit their perspective to just the horizon. True leaders must also take in the periphery. Pope Francis emphasizes that we perceive a situation most accurately when we look at it from the standpoint of those on the edge rather than those in the center. The state of the economy looks different to the unemployed. The political structure looks different to someone who is powerless. The community to the excluded, or the security forces to the persecuted. So he's including the marginalized people and saying, look, folks, we have to listen to marginalized people because they have something important to tell us about how our society is structured. The third essential quality is clarity, and clarity starts with the clarity of mind and sound judgment that arise from emotional awareness and control.
Yeah, I don't think you can also have you cannot have the first two values without clarity.
Right.
Like if you do not have clarity, the first two things we talked about, they're not possible, because if you don't have the clarity to see that you have K-shaped economy where you clearly have two divergent classes, like there's like no question anymore
Right.
that you have two sects of people. You've got
Right.
the rich people and the poor people. If you don't have the clarity to see that, you're not going to be able to have any effective purpose. And you certainly can't plan the future if you're not aligned with the workforce.
Yeah.
So very interesting kind of thing that, it's interesting that it's third. And I wonder if that's intentional or not. So
I don't know necessarily, except for humility being the last one. Who knows whether these are in any order, because you have to have really all of them. And he does talk about the erosion of the middle class throughout this book as well, and that
okay.
can't be sustained.
Yeah.
A good leader is contemplative, meaning that they can be present in the moment and find meaning in experience. Like many others, I have found the practices of meditation and the daily examine to be effective disciplines. That means thinking about what you're doing, for a more contemplative approach to life, and as a consequence, leadership. Leadership always has an element of power, even when it is grounded solely in the powers of persuasion. But the quest for power over others quickly becomes dangerous, especially if it is divorced from the moral authority that effective leaders require. That moral authority comes from the people.
Correct.
Leaders need to renounce power for its own sake and discern the power of service. I think that's one of the most important sentences in his book so far, because now he is the Prime Minister of Canada.
Yeah, read it again for everybody in case they...
Leaders need to renounce power for its own sake and discern the power of service, which means that even though you're the most powerful person in the country, you don't work for your own power and to enhance your own power, but you work to service the people. Because without social capital, without the people supporting you, you're gone eventually. You can try to be a dictator, but it won't last. History has never shown that a dictator lasts for very long. Okay, so let's just go straight. His book has tons and tons of detailed stories, which are really interesting. I encourage people to read the book, at least the last part of the book, unless you're an economics geek. Hopefully I can continue to speak.
You're doing great. You're doing great.
Okay, competence is the next one. Competence. Plan beats no plan, but a plan well executed is best of all. So I'll read that again. Plan beats no plan.
Yes.
And what have people been saying about the war in Iran? No plan.
What plan?
Competence doesn't mean getting everything right, but it is important to get some right, get more right than wrong. Strategy is an important part of leadership, but execution is vital. You need to be able to do what you intend, and your colleagues will remember your deeds more than your words. Deeds more than words. True social posts, who cares? What happens? So, making hard decisions isn't easy by definition. Churchill had many sleepless nights. President Obama observed that decisions wouldn't come to him as president if they weren't difficult, and so on and so forth. He cites Kennedy and a number of others. Then finally, he talks about humility. Good leaders combine personal humility, self-knowledge, and the ability to learn. I'll say that again. Humility, self-knowledge, and the ability to learn. Well, I know one thing that Trump has, self-knowledge. He knows what he wants, but that's about it. Okay, so those three things means that you are able to admit mistakes, that you seek and accept feedback, and that you share lessons that you've learned. When leaders become overconfident or turn to writing books, they stop learning. That's a funny thing that Mark Carney said there, because he's written this huge tome here before he becomes prime minister. And he's not stopping learning, obviously.
No.
So that's that first section, talking about those elements. So he gives many details. As I say, it's really worth getting into the details, but we're just going to deal with the concepts here and just find out who Mark Carney really is because of his leadership role in the world right now.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think this is a great starter on this section. It's called Reclaiming the Values to Create Value for All. He says, given the deficits accumulated over recent decades, we must concentrate on rebuilding social capital to make markets work. To do so, individuals and their firms must build their sense of responsibility for the system. They have to develop responsibility for the system, not just responsibility to their shareholders, but responsibility to everyone engaged in their business, clients, customers, supply chains. Everybody has to be in. More broadly, by rebasing valuation on society's values, we can create platforms of prosperity for all that focus on solving our bigger problems. The action plans in this book for leaders, companies, and countries unabashedly recognize that the dynamism of markets is essential to our prosperity and well-being. But markets too need purpose. Through shared understanding and values, we can channel the dynamism of markets to create value for all. Okay, so this is a really important point because what he's saying is that, hey, free markets are a good thing. It's not bad. You don't have to get rid of all the businesses and all those bad corporations to have value for all. But those corporations have to make a serious investment into those values. So this is kind of different from the old kind of notion of, capitalism versus communism and that kind of confrontational approach to the whole issue. It's the idea that, oh yeah, okay, of course markets have to exist, but the people in that marketplace who are, running it basically have to have some values. They can't just value profit over people. And that's one of the things he says often in his book. But that doesn't mean that companies that make profits have to disappear, which is what the sort of right-wing wackos always say whenever anybody says anything that has to do with social value. They right away, they're very quick to say, oh, that's socialism. Oh, that's going to be bad for companies and bad for the market.
I was reading, I was just going back through some of my, sometimes I was going through my closet and I found all my old notes from high school, world history. Like 10 years old now, these papers, wild, but I'm reading about all of these different, American history. And I'm reading about how this country has gone to war to fight socialism. Socialism. So basically we went to war to fight equivalence and a fair market. The country that is supposedly based on free markets went to war to stop values that promote equality and universal success.
Yeah.
While claiming to be the leader of the free world. It's really quite remarkable.
So are you talking about fighting China?
No, I'm talking about it's like Korea and Vietnam and
Vietnam,
that
yeah,
whole
the communists were coming in, and so they were fighting communism, right?
they used communism as a blanket to pick up socialism and sweep it away. They said it's
Correct.
capitalism or bust. That's why
Right.
they say Marxism,
Right.
because then they blanket it all. It's intentional. It's
Yeah.
intentional use of words. They're shaping reality through the lens that they're describing it.
Yeah.
And it like really worked, and they really demonized it. And it's like I was like gonna make kind of like a joke. It's like it sounds like he's a communist, right? Like that's literally what some like idiot would say, like, like, oh, sounds like a communist. Like, exactly, is a great comment here. There's different kinds of socialism. Socialism is a spectrum, and free markets are part of socialism
Yeah.
because you need incentive for people to want to be successful.
Right.
The issue is not incentive or personal success. It's you also need to have some sort of collective benefit as well. That's
Correct.
why I really like wealth caps, because you can personally be successful, but you also get to contribute to the whole once you reach a certain level of personal success.
Right. Yeah,
So,
exactly. So I mean, with that, and that's basically the crux of Carney's argument, is that the whole society benefits when there is innovation and when there is change that increases our life expectancy, that makes our lives easier to manage, whatever it is that increases our enjoyment of life is a good thing. And nobody would say that that happens in a vacuum and it could happen by some single governmental or capitalist organization running everything. It just wouldn't work because that's not how the human society works. Human
right.
society has always worked that people find, that really talented person amazing, and they appreciate that, and they want to make sure that that really talented person contributes whatever it is, whether it's the best table that's ever been constructed, or a singer, or a writer, or an inventor. We acknowledge that some people have incredible talents and we want to nurture that.
Yeah.
That's what exchange in its fundamental thing has always been about. Bartering was always about, I can make bread and you can, like, I don't know, educate my kids or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay,
Do you
so
think individualism is counter to that? Like pushing a community where, like American culture, right? Like individual success is held above like community success. Do you think that's one of the factors that kind of suppresses that?
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. It's the confusion. It's what I call monism, the idea that one concept has to override all other concepts.
Mhm.
And of course, in a sane society, the rights of the individual can only exist in a balance of the rights of the collective, of the community. So in an individual in a society where the community is completely decimated can't thrive. It's just not possible,
Correct.
right? So, and prime examples of that come from the incredibly horrible stories coming out of Gaza, where you have these young people who are going, trying to go to university, they want to get educated, they want to advance themselves, and they can't because their whole society's been destroyed,
Yeah.
right? Anyway, let's get on to the next list. The next list is really good because it's talking about what these values might be, and these core values. Just think about them as I say them. Solidarity, which is of course what we've just been talking about. Fairness, responsibility, both personal and to the society. Resilience, sustainability, dynamism, and humility. So actually, that list, actually, a number of those things were in our thing we just said about dynamism. Things are
Yeah.
dynamic. There are really talented people and medium talented people, and then there are people who are just amazed and they have to go to work every day to support the inventions, right?
Mhm.
Resilience comes through community strength. If your community is strong, then it can be resilient. But if it's bifurcated and busted apart by ice or whatever mechanism is used to destroy the resilience of your society, then you can't go forward. Responsibility, personal responsibility, also responsibility to the community, obviously solidarity and fairness. Those are all things that are really important. So just looking at, we're halfway through our show here,
Mhm.
and I'm just going to read about each of these, what Mark Carney means when he says each of these 7 points. So very briefly, I'm just going to read like the first paragraph of each section. So
Yeah.
solidarity has been at the heart of effective response to COVID. Solidarity is critical to a just transition to a net zero economy, and it will determine the success of the fourth industrial revolution, which is where we are, what we're in right now. He talks about that in detail in the previous
That's
chapters.
an interesting. Okay, so there's these. It's interesting when people put a name to something, right? Like, because there's a lot of times where something exists and no one has like stated what it is.
Right.
And he totally, that's totally true, right? That's like very. There is an industrial revolution going on, and like when you look at it that way, it also opens up. Like literally, my brain just said, "Oh, reframe," and now I've got like 15 different lanes of thinking because
Right.
of his framing, and it's valuable. Like that's
Well,
going to help me do my job later.
so
So,
I'll just briefly say he does outline what that fourth industrial revolution is. And it
oh,
is,
okay,
of course, the development of machine learning, AI, how technology is coming in to replace certain parts of manufacturing and so on, and that it's having a big effect on how people do business, how they organize their lives, businesses being run out of people's basements, the warehouse type of business becoming less prominent, and just a whole series of changes that are as big as the Industrial Revolution. And he also talks about the fact that during that time, change in the workforce is going to have to happen, and that's going to be difficult. That people will lose their jobs because the jobs are no longer necessary that they have been trained for and are doing, and they'll have to retrain. And there's going to be a period that's really difficult for the workforce. But he insists throughout the book that that's not an excuse for the workforce to have more pain than they already have. That the opposite has to happen as this transition happens. It has to be a just transition. Okay. And this is something that the radical left talks about all the time. The
whoa,
radical left is not
whoa,
radical.
too woke. They're too woke. They're woke. They don't sleep. They're always woke, always awake. I don't know why I don't sleep, but it's because I'm truthing all night long. I'm going to genocide an entire civilization. Just kidding. We're going to blockade Hormuz. We
Right.
were going to open it. Now we're going to blockade it. No ships. No ships until they throw all their uranium in the ocean. Okay.
Good one.
Thank you.
Good
Thank
one.
you.
It's amazing that you're not watching the guy very much because
I
you're
I've
doing a
seen
great
enough.
imitation.
I grew up watching him freaking when I was in high school. That's when he first got elected. I remember the first time he got elected, 2016. I was in high school and I was like, oh, that's fucked up. That's not good. And I was watching all of that the first time through. I must have watched him. I must have watched hundreds of hours of Trump speak. And there was a day where I realized like I'm killing my brain cells, like watching him talk. And it
Right.
actually doesn't help anything at all. So you like, well, once you like, it's interesting. It's like, we know he's bad. We know he needs to go to jail. We know he's a pedophile who like literally killed kids and buried them in the desert. Like it's literally public domain. Like it's nuts that this is even like a thing, but
Right.
it's like at the same time, you know, it is like, what is the, I don't know. I just lost my train of thought. To be honest
I
with you,
thought,
but
what's he looking for? What's he looking for
what was
there?
I looking for? I don't know. I just think that he's like
Crazy.
clearly not in like a good, like he's not a good leader. He offers nothing. He's constantly like crossing his own wires. There's no stability. There's no accountability. Like it's so juxtaposed to what Carney does
Exactly.
and his foreign policy.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Well, let me just read the paragraph on solidarity here because it just states very nicely what I was attempting to say. Solidarity connects companies and their stakeholders. Stakeholders, he doesn't say shareholders. Stakeholders, employees, suppliers, customers, and communities. He doesn't even mention shareholders. Solidarity extends across regions and borders. Ultimately, solidarity is about people. How to help people acquire new skills so that they have varied and fulfilling careers.
Yeah.
How to help people transition into new industries, how to ensure economic change benefits everyone from First Nations to new Canadians from coast to coast to coast. Okay, so he's in one paragraph, he's laying out that, the workforce includes everybody, including First Nations. And in Canada, we're serious about reconciliation. To new Canadians in Canada, we're serious about immigration. We understand that immigration helps keep the country strong. And to another one, really good. To achieve this, we need to support workers, not jobs. Companies should guarantee employability, not employment.
Hmm.
Have you ever heard of such a distinction before?
That's actually it makes sense. If you have a workforce, you're going to have the job market, because you'll be able to apply that. That workforce you're going to want to leverage that.
Right.
So like if yeah, no, it does make a lot of sense.
So in other words, it's not good enough just to have a job. The companies need to support the workers. That means workplace safety, all sorts of things. And they need to guarantee employability, not employment. That implies that the education system is strong so that the people who are searching for a job are employable because they have the education needed. It's an incredibly short way to imply a whole bunch of stuff about what's needed. Governments need to redesign the labor market and educational institutions so that new ways of working respect the enduring values of dignity and purpose in work. In other words, the companies and the education system is actually what was implied in his first sentence. He then makes clear in his next sentence. So that's what solidarity is all about. Now let's go to the next one. Literally, I will only read uh, one paragraph. Fairness and responsibility. Two of the core lessons that he learned at the central bank were those. It is distressingly easy for institutions to develop in ways that undercut fairness. That's a good quote.
Yeah, it sure is.
Whoa,
Oh, my phone.
that's a cool way for your phone to ring. Um, As we have seen, institutions are the rules of the game, the constraints that structure our political, economic, and social interactions. Fairness is fundamental to their legitimacy. In other words, when your institutions are unfair and the population is saying that's not fair, that Doge and Elon Musk shared our medical records and our data with who knows which companies. That's against the law. Doge should be sued for sharing medical records. It's against the law in every country in the world that your private medical information is shared. Just one example. I mean, that a lot of people are upset about. Um, yeah. Anyway, I'll just read one more sentence. It's critical that laws, rules, codes, and conventions are equally applied and are seen to be so. The people have to believe, you have to do it, you have to say you're going to do it, you have to do it, and the people have to see it in action. That's what he's talking about. Okay, I think resilience. Resilience. What's resilience about? The state has been failing in its fundamental duty to protect. A pandemic has been allowed to run rampant, leading to the wholesale withdrawal of personal liberties and entire populations facing risks of unemployment and inadequate health care. So remember, this book is being written in 2021, or actually 2020, right in the first wave
Right.
of the pandemic.
Yeah, this is just hitting.
So countries must pursue a more disciplined approach to building resilience so that people can withstand shocks when they appear and the economy can recover quickly from them. We have suffered through too much fragility with shocks cascading through the system, magnifying destruction along the way. As the scandal of the too big to fail banks demonstrated, he's referring to 2008, when those responsible for failure can simply walk away from its consequences, market incentives are warped and social capital corrodes. When Wall Street walked away from the subprime mortgage crisis in 2008 without any consequences to them for having caused it, the people were livid. And the shock lasted for almost a decade. Anyway, that's resilience. And then I think humility is the last one. There you
Mm-hmm.
get the whole section on how to build resilience. Sustainability, only one paragraph. Sustainable development meets the needs of the present generation without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. Its pillars are economic, environmental, and social. It is an understatement to say that we have been eroding them all.
Yeah.
The burdens from mounting government debts, underfunded pensions, inadequate health and social care to environmental calamity, we are pushing those onto the next generation, and that's not fair. It's inequitable and irresponsible. So he's talking about thinking about the future. Instead of just doing things for the short-term profit, he says you can't just push all of this pain onto the next generation. There's a concept in indigenous thought of thinking of the 7 generations, which means that you think about where you came from 7 generations back, and you think 7 generations into the future.
Right.
And that's how First Nations people think about husbandry and how you manage resources so that they will never run out. You never extract too much.
Yeah.
That's a little bit, I mean, he's not implying that kind of really extreme conservation type of thinking, but it's definitely there. And then we'll just I want to go to the section called humility, because this chapter is just something else.
Okay. I'm excited.
Okay. I know it's a lot of reading, but
No, this is good. I'm learning. I'm learning. This is very interesting.
so humility, um, humility matters. It matters because it is an attitude to leading and governing. It's not an impediment to acting. Humility is recognizing that there will be surprises. Carney says, I have learned that it is worth asking what could happen if things go wrong, even when you think it unlikely. What if subprime isn't contained? What if a cyber attack is successful? What if there is no deal? Humility admits the limits of our knowledge, that there are unknown unknowns, which make resilience and adaptability imperative. You have to be resilient and adaptable to succeed in leadership. That's my summary of that. The
Yeah.
humble can plan for failure even if they don't know how or when it will happen. Humility allows us to set goals before we know all the answers. If we are humble, we don't think we can make a map of the whole world to chart our course or try to put a price on every value so we can optimize. If we are
Mm-hmm.
humble, we can recognize that answers can be found through processes that will bring them out through debate, considering different perspectives, and forging consensus.
I mean, he's just intelligent. I just like everything he says. It means that he fundamentally understands that like everything is systemic, like that there's not like, like the biggest problem with people in my observation, my limited, experience is that people think linearly, one cause, one effect, right? Okay, gas is up, it's Biden's fault.
Yeah.
Like,
So,
are you? That's so dumb. Like,
yeah.
are you? It's so dumb. The gas could go up for a million reasons, right? And it's like it's that distinction of someone who's intelligent and understands that like a global economy is deeply interconnected. Um, you know, he's giving what he's saying is also understandable. That's the other thing. It's like you don't need to be, Mark Carney and studious your whole life in a central banker to understand the principles that he's sharing in this book, which I
Well,
think is pretty.
yeah. And in fact, the sentence I just read, you could just read that sentence and talk about what it would mean if people in general, like you and I and people in the comments here, people reading on Substack, people just going to work. If everybody thought about these three things and incorporated them into their daily lives, there would be a transformation in society. So this is the beauty of Carney. It's very detailed with tons of examples and very thorough analysis, some of it impossible, impenetrable economic theory and blah, blah, blah. And then you get to a simple sentence like this, which I'll read again. And let's think about this for a second. If we are humble, we can recognize that answers can be found through processes that will bring them out through debate, considering different perspectives, and forging consensus. That means that you try to destroy the divide and conquer language that is current in the public sphere. You try to destroy it, and you insist, and you have to be humble to do this. You can't be, rage scrolling and trolling in comments, and all of that behavior is completely antithetical to this idea. This idea about being humble means that even if you're faced with a MAGA person across from you, you try to figure out a way to engage them, to listen to their perspective, and try to find out what's driving that perspective. You want to figure it out, because deep down that we all get up in the morning and we'd like to have a good day. We'd like to eat good food. We'd like to have friends. We're all human, and we all have this thing that is just our day, going through our day. And even if people are brainwashed by crazy ideas, if you can introduce to them the idea that they might listen to somebody they disagree with and try to figure out. If both parties are trying to figure out what the other one's thinking and can get out of their own rage and their own ostentation and their own, fervor, then, in other words, they become humble, then we can make progress. So I'll read it again. Debate, considering different perspectives, and forging consensus. In other words, how do we find the common good when we're having a discussion with somebody else? There's got to be common ground there somewhere. But people have to be in a position where they can think. But if you're brainwashed, then you only reinforce the idea you already have, and you're not going to do this. You're not going to look for other perspectives. So, if people took this to heart, that they could debate with others and that they could try to find the different perspectives and entertain the idea that there might be a different way of thinking than the way I'm convinced that I'm right. But what does I'm right mean? That's all about somehow me identifying my individualism, that I have said the right thing with the community, that the entire community that is my echo chamber all agrees with me. So therefore, we don't need to listen to anyone else, because my echo chamber in my social media feed agrees with me, right? So anyway, I think that's kind of, oh, look, we did that in less time than an hour.
You did great. You did great.
I didn't think that was possible.
Yeah, you did great.
Yeah.
I was, I think you did good.
So he talks about, in this last section about humility, he talks about a few other concepts like uncertainty, like being able to accept that uncertainty would exist, right? That you may not be right. Being adaptable rather than pig-headed, let's say. And in terms of how society is working, adaptability means I'm not going to fight for my job in the oil industry because I need to adapt. I need to, see the picture beyond my own employment in the oil industry and understand that there's a big transformation happening, and that I, as a worker, need to retrain, rather than, having my union go do whatever it can to support the oil industry because I happen to work in the oil industry. It's difficult. I have to adapt. It's going to be difficult for me, but I have to adapt, because change is always happening. The only thing constant in history is change. That's the only thing that stays the same, is that it's always changing, right? So adaptability is another thing, and the acceptance of chance, that you don't know what's going to happen. But if you're ready and open with, some skills to adapt, then maybe the change that happens by chance, you don't know when it's going to hit, you'll be able to wrap your mind around adapting to the change. And then here is a point on responsibility. I guess that's one of the last things we could talk about here, if I can find the right paragraph to quote. Yeah, okay, here we go. Okay, I'll have to. Very compressed language is typical of Carney. By living purpose, companies can work to find solutions to society's challenges while being responsible and responsive employers with honest, fair, and lasting relationships with suppliers and customers, and engaging in their communities as good corporate citizens. Now, he should have put the word purpose in inverted commas so that you understand the sentence. So, a company living purpose means a company having its purpose statement include all of those things that mentioned in the paragraph.
Right.
And acknowledging that the leaders of companies are the ones who have to find the solutions about how they operate so that their society can be healthy. So that's what corporate responsibility is basically what he's talking about. And when he talks about honest, fair, and lasting relationships with everybody involved, that's the key, in my view, that's the key component that's missing in a lot of relationships between businesses and their workers and their customers. Examples would be having a support line that is available by AI chat and email, or not at all. Like, let's say the support is only a bot on their website and they have no other access points. I've actually experienced this recently. A company I thought was really great, which I will not name, they have an AI chatbot. They have an FAQ, but you can't actually get through to a human support person.
It's insane. It's like you need help, and AI is only as smart as you know how to use it. Right? That's what I've said a lot. And like the assumption that you can just plug an AI in and give it like a bunch of prompts that it'll do a good job is short-sighted.
Well, yeah, and the chatbots, are only, you type something in and then it's just going to a database of FAQs basically and spitting shit at you. And when your question is not already thought of, then there's no information. So this is the problem with relying on existing data, is that if you have a question or an idea that hasn't already been asked, then you're up shit creek.
Right.
And so unless there is some human intervention in that business that takes your call and you have a discussion and the human being realizes that what you're talking about is a failing in their software or their thing that they made that they hadn't considered yet, it won't become part of the database until a human says, oh, this guy's got a really good argument about something that we didn't do very well, and we should fix that. So you need that human person at the end of the support line who isn't just a minimum wage employee who doesn't understand what the hell you're talking about. I mean, do Apple support and get one of those beginners, and they're just reading from a website. And I say to them, I can go to that website and read that too. That's not what I need. Please accelerate my case up to a more senior representative, right? So it depends on what the company is doing and whether they're actually taking seriously their relationship with their customers. So I'm sure we've all run across this kind of situation quite often. And what Carney's suggesting is that you got to do more than that. It's got to be more than that. It can't just be, it's cheaper for us to put an AI bot in and have an FAQ. So that's what we're going to do.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's like also like there's like you said, there's planning the future, or like planning for the future and planning the future.
Planning.
Right.
Right.
So planning for the future looks like, oh, well, we want to use AI. So we're going to put AI in it. Planning the future is like, well, ultimately, a full AI integration has a ton of risk, because if it falls through and you've gotten rid of all of the human touch, you're going to have basically a service industry that is just useless.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. It's just going to be entirely useless.
Exactly.
And that's where things are going. So, especially as their data centers they have right now, they're going to get older. Things are going to break. They're going to have to replace them, and then they're not going to have the parts, right? So this whole infrastructure they're building everything on is dependent on them scaling everything, because they only think in planning for the future. So they're actively just assuming they can get more and more material exponentially. They're not looking at the system from a fundamental standpoint of, if I'm going to plan the future, I need to plan sustainable resource extraction.
Right. Very good.
And
Well,
if you're not doing that, right, like these are the things he's trying to say. And you can tell that Carney is doing this. You can tell that Carney, based on his actions, is planning the future. He's
right.
not planning for it. He's not reacting. He's being proactive. He
Right.
knew what relationships to pursue right out of the gate. He
Right.
knew the middle powers needed to be stated clearly. The situation needed to be made abundantly, I'm going to say clear again. I need a better word, but abundantly clear to every country that, like, this is not the United States, and its capacity is not sustainable. We need a new doctrine. We need the Carney doctrine.
Right.
And he will go down in history as the counterweight to corporate fascism, I think. And I think that's a really important role. And it will have impacts, because he is building that very system you're talking about. He's building a base. He's building those relationships with countries that are providers and producers. He knows. And there's one last thing I think that maybe Carney will be able to make better on this than anyone else, is that, looks like my father-in-law can't get in the garage, so I'll be right back. But
we're actually just about out of time.
Okay. So tell you what, I'm going to put up your QR code. I'm going to run and let him in, and then I'll come back and I will say, we'll close it out.
Okay. Sounds good. Okay. So while Shane's out letting the father-in-law, I think he said, in, I'll just again remind everybody that this is the book by Mark Carney. It's called Values. He wrote it in, I guess, well, it's a very thick book. It's like that thick. And he wrote it, it was published in 2021. So it seems to me he wrote it because he's referring to the pandemic throughout, that he probably wrote it in 2020. And it gives you a very clear background to both his economic, experience as a governor of the Bank of England and the Bank of Canada. It gives you a lot in the whole first section of the book on how the economy is structured worldwide, with lots of references to Canada and England. And it's a section that I couldn't get through because it was so detailed. I mean, he talks about every sort of economic factor that you can possibly imagine. And unless you're really into that into that sort of thing, it's going to be pretty hard going. Fact, kind of boring, really. But the whole last section of the book, on where he's really talking about values and responsibility, and how leaders, not just political leaders, but leaders at any level of society, should view their environment, the people that they are leading. When you see how he views the leader as just simply the person who's been tasked with putting it all together, but not the person who tells everybody else what to do, but the person who can listen, the person who can be humble, who feels a sense of responsibility to all of the people involved in the project. You see a completely different leadership model than the model of, let's say, Viktor Orban, Xi Jinping, Trump, and all of
Right.
these fascist dictators, right? And that's why Carney is being lauded so much right now, because he's said it all in this book pretty well, as much as you can, and he's realizing it. He's acting according to his philosophy, and that's why we have Mark Carney running Canada and a world leader right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah. I think you said it really well. I think that he's going to be a major driving force in the world going forward. And I think that what's important to take away when we look at Mark Carney is that, yes, there's a ton of evil, but there's also intelligent resistance. And that is more important than anything else, because reactive resistance, just doing what you think has to be done without thinking it through, versus someone who's planning the future,
Yeah.
means that he's already thought about this, and it's going to matter in the long term.
Yeah, and I think also, and just also to keep, as we said at the beginning, that the language is really important. Sure, he's a leader, but throughout the book, he's saying that um, although he's speaking about how leaders should behave, it's always talking about humility and conversations and taking in other people's perspectives and so on. So it is very inclusive, and it really insists that to be a good leader, you have to have the people behind you. You have to have social capital. It's not just capital that's money, that's exchange, that's transactional. It's the capital that is social capital, that is people who believe in the project. They believe because of the way you have interacted with the people, whether they're employees or shareholders or whatever, that you have the confidence in the leader because they have thought about you. They have thought about your circumstance. They want a healthy society. And that's why the subtitle of this book is Building a Better World for All, Building a Better World for All. So,
Fantastic.
yeah, I think
Fantastic.
that we've given Mark a big shot in the arm. Not that he needs it,
No,
but
no.
it just seemed to me a really important thing to
I
talk
think it
about
was
at this
great.
juncture. Yeah,
I think it's great to have this direct comparison from competent leadership to pure buffoonery.
right.
Um, and it's a great comparison, especially now. And it just should show people in America in particular that, like, competent leadership is not an ask.
Right.
It should be a mandate.
Right.
It's not an
Well
ask. It
said.
should be the mandate. It should
Well
be the
said.
expectation.
Right.
So, everyone, if you enjoyed this, well, then you need to make sure to go and subscribe to John, who put this idea together, who brought this to the dialogue today. And, he's, I always say he's as much of this show as I am. So I am grateful, for you, John, to bring this idea. I really enjoyed it. And I hope you guys enjoyed it too, because very eye-opening to get this perspective into Mark Carney. So make sure you guys go and support him at his Substack.
And support
Support. I'm
Shane wherever
struggling.
he is.
I'm mirroring any point all directions simultaneously. So yeah, if you guys want to support me as well, you can go, and here's my a QR code that'll take you to my link tree. So there's a bunch of links on there. You can subscribe, you can make donations, you can do all that cool stuff. So, normal spiel. I'm not going to go too long into it. You guys know the deal. If you guys want to support our work, when you're, in this space, trying to develop yourself as an individual, it's really important for paid subscriptions to help us all grow and get that stuff done. So if you're in a position to do so, please consider supporting both of us. Free subscriptions are the bread and butter. You want to get the news, you want to get the update when the dialogues come in next week, then you got to be subscribed. So make sure you do that as well. But, I think that this was a great show. I hope everyone enjoyed it, and we will be back for another dialogue here in the near future. So, John, great to have
Always
you.
a pleasure, Shane. Always a pleasure.
All right, my friends. Goodbye, everyone.
Okay,
And we'll
take
talk
care.
to you later.
Peace.